over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live, wherever you're joining us live on the interweb, good morning and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. In the host chair, that's me, Dave Manouk. My main man, Ezzy Ginsburg, is to my right, your left. And we are here for 2 hours on today's Illegal Curve Hockey Show to talk about all things Winnipeg Jets, all things NHL Stanley Cup Finals. The Calder Cup Finals are underway, Ezzy. We got the NHL Draft in 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. A friendly reminder that Illegal Curve will be broadcasting the first round live. That'll be a special edition show. We'll be at the draft party with the Jets down at Canada Life Center. So join us down there for that event, and we'll be broadcasting. Probably that ends up being like a 3-hour show, Ezzy, maybe longer. We'll be on air for all of it. Hopefully get the Jets first round pick and whatever else we can do. Maybe some of the prospects will be in attendance, but that is for 2 weeks from now. And then, of course, like I said, we'll be broadcasting our Saturday show, which will most likely, again, be an extended edition one, Ezzy, as we lead you into day 2 of the draft. But let's pull it back to today, to the present moment, Ezra. And how are you? How you feeling? And are you ready to go?
Dave, first of all, I am definitely ready to go. I'm doing great. I apologize. This is the 3rd week in a row I'm using my computer microphone. I'm having some issues with my computer and my Shure mic. So You'll notice I don't have my Shure mic in front of me. So I apologize to the viewers and listeners. My audio is a little echoey, but I think it's not too bad. Dave, you told me I'm coming in pretty good. So doing well. And not only am I doing well, anytime we can do a show without Mindell, I mean, it's a great day, right? Like, every time we do the show without Drew, we ask ourselves, like, do we really need him? I'd say he's kind of irrelevant, Dave.
Interesting. Well, what isn't irrelevant, Ezra, is the buzz around the Winnipeg Jets. And I don't even know if we really delved into it, because I think it happened around when we were doing our last show, but the Dylan Larkin trade request out of Detroit, that was kind of surprising news. I liked how immediately Jets fans were like, well, what do they need to do in order to acquire Dylan Larkin? Then they got the news that Dylan Larkin apparently only wants to go to 3 teams, although that list might be expanded. I'm sure Stevie Y is not going to be, he's not going to be selling him for pennies on the dollar, but there was some talk about, the other members of that gold medal winning team, whether it's a Zach Werenski or a Brady Tkachuk or Connor Hellebuyck, looking for other places to play next season. So I'm just going to ask you, we'll start the show, Ezzy, with that. Like, what do you put any stock into that? Do you like, again, there's been a lot of talk, but there's nothing concrete, nothing official. But what's kind of your assessment of what we're hearing about the Connor Hellebuyck discussion? Do you put any merit into it?
I think you have to put some merit into it, Dave. Like, we don't. First off, we aren't aware that Connor Hellebuyck has requested a trade rumor, so we have to get that out there right away. But I think we've talked about this before. For the first time, suggesting Connor Hellebuyck might be traded isn't an absurd notion, right? And if you would have, like, for example, if you would have said this a year ago, coming off Hellebuyck winning the Vezina, winning the Hart, the Jets winning the President's Trophy, saying that would be absurd. Just trading Hellebuyck up, nobody would take you seriously.
Right.
But because of how disastrous the 25-26 season was for the Jets,
right?
I think, it's starting to make people think that maybe Hellebuyck feels that he has a better chance to win a Stanley Cup with another team, right? Mm-hmm. And also his comments, the famous 7 or 8 second pause, right? Dave, you were there. Yeah. And I think, that postseason press conference or postseason scrum, I guess is a better word to use, where Hellebuyck voiced his frustration, and he quite literally said that the team has to get better. And nobody was surprised to hear that. I think it was that pause when he was asked about his future in Winnipeg that raised a lot of eyebrows, right, Dave? So look, if we're looking at this, from a macro level, I think more players are going to be requesting trades, right? Like, I think, that's just the nature of pro hockey, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of Hellebuyck, again, like, until we hear that Hellebuyck has requested a trade,
yeah,
going on the assumption that Connor Hellebuyck is going to be a member of the Winnipeg Jets going forward, right? And it's going to be a completely different conversation, Dave, if we're talking about, the Jets missing the playoffs this time next year, because
yeah, no question.
Then I think you're getting closer to a situation where you're blowing up the core, not just Hellebuyck, potentially other players, right? So I think that, there's a lot of talk on social media these days about Connor Hellebuyck and various trade scenarios. But right now, at least for me, Dave, I'm not thinking about all these different possibilities and whether Hellebuyck could be traded to Florida or another team or anything like that. Because to me, there's just a lot of noise right now. And it's noise. And until we're told that Hellebuyck has requested a trade room, that's when I'm going to start to take it more seriously.
I think it's absolutely. I think it's just, if people are saying, why are you talking about it? If it's just speculation and innuendo, I just think, that's the kind of news right now that's happening around the Winnipeg Jets. But there's no question to me that, and again, I don't know one way or the other. I haven't heard anything, but my assessment is Connor Hellebuyck first and foremost, wants to win a Stanley Cup. Secondly, wants to win a Stanley Cup with the Winnipeg Jets. And then I'd say thirdly, is prepared to win a Stanley Cup with another team if the Winnipeg Jets are not a contender. And I think he's prepared, I could be wrong, to give this Jets team some runway to get themselves back on track. Now, again, we haven't seen any big movement, right, Ezzy? It's been fairly quiet from a Jets perspective. So there's nothing really happening. And again, a lot of it doesn't have, there's some minor moves that have been happening over the last few weeks. But it's just an interesting situation in the sense that the Jets, Craig Button was on our show, and one of the things that he advocated was that 8th rounder who could be a foundational piece years to come be available for a trade for the Winnipeg Jets. So as I said, from my perspective, the problem with the Jets trying to restock the cupboard, but also contending, is you don't have the assets really to do it. So how are you going to try and get into one lane? Because right now, in my mind, as they're straddling both. They're trying to contend with this group, and they're saying, listen, we're not expecting Adam Lowry, Dylan Samberg, Cole Perfetti, and Connor Hellebuyck, to name 4 guys. Josh Morrissey obviously also suffered an injury, but we're not expecting those guys to have the type of seasons that they had last year. And so we're counting on a bounce back from those guys. And they're expecting, obviously, Gabriel Velarde to continue to excel. They're counting on Mark Scheifele to continue to excel. And same with Kyle Connor. So there's a lot of things that they're expecting to bounce back from last year that they got basically out of that group 2 years ago. But at the same time, like I said, it's also a question of all these young guys who are going to come up, right? The Danny Zhilkins, Nikita Chibrikovs, Brad Lamberts. Isaac Roseanne, what are they going to have? What kind of impact are they going to have? How have their summers gone? So for me, though, from a Jet perspective, if you look at this team and you think to yourself, like, if you look at the Carolina Hurricanes or the Vegas Golden Knights right now, the 2 teams battling it out in the Stanley Cup, I don't know that the Jets are beating these teams in a 7-game series. I'm being facetious. They're not. So the reality is you have to put yourself up against them and say, well, how can we do this? How can we get back to this level of play that we need to attend? And the reality is that you don't have the depth in the current roster to do it. So that 8th overall pick, not 8th round pick. They don't have 8 rounds anymore. They used to, but they don't have 8 rounds anymore. The 8th overall.
Nikolai Habibulin an 8th rounder?
He might have been. That's that we'd have to check the archives. But again, like I said, it to me, the way I look at it is you're trying to straddle the fence, and right now you're kind of in both camps, and it's hard to be in both camps and have the level of success that they want to achieve with this current roster and with this current makeup. And so that's why it's incumbent.
By the way, Dave, Khabibulin was a 9th rounder.
Oh, there we go. That's interesting. But I think that to me, again, we've been saying this for a while now, but the executive has to say, what do we want to be? Do we want to be a contender with this group? Do we want to mortgage our future? But I don't think you can do both. Would be my position.
No, absolutely, Dave. And yeah, our buddy Retro Modern 2 is pointing out that Dustin Byfuglien was an 8th rounder. Both of those players turned out to be really good picks by the respective teams, right? Obviously, Byfuglien drafted by Chicago, Khabibulin drafted by the Jets 1.0. But no, you're absolutely right, Dave. That's why I think it's fascinating. Like, we're talking about, the Jets draft party and we're going to be broadcasting live, but, do the Jets actually make that 8th overall pick, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm leaning towards the Jets are going to make the 8th overall pick, Dave, but will many people be surprised if they trade that pick? Because it's like you said, that's one of their big assets right now to move, to acquire, whether that's a forward or a defenseman, right? So I think that's going to be really interesting to see. I'm sure, conversations are happening within the Jets organization, and not just within the organization, but with other teams. And obviously they're having, their conversations with their pro scouts and everything like that, and amateur scouts as well. But unless you're moving like a Cole Perfetti, or unless you're moving like a Dylan DeMello or a Neil Pionk in the back end, I mean, I think that 1st round pick is the big, trade chip that you're waving around, right? But when you talk about, Dave, how the Jets have to pick a lane, yeah, the Jets are in win now mode. And you look at a team like the Vegas Golden Knights, well, how many top prospects do the Vegas Golden Knights have in their system? I couldn't tell you one right now, because obviously the Vegas Golden Knights have been successful, but also they've been focused on winning. They haven't been the Vegas Golden Knights are not a draft and develop team, right, Dave?
No. Yeah, that's a very fair assessment.
Knights are a trade and sign and win team. So I think again, with the 8th overall pick coming up, we're going to have Shane Malloy on, and we're obviously going to talk to him about some options for the Jets at 8th overall. But I think this is the first time that I can remember that the Jets 2.0 have been back and had a 1st round pick where you would say that there's a pretty decent chance that they could move. Obviously, it depends on who's available, who we're talking about. But you mentioned Dylan Larkin earlier. Yeah, Dylan Larkin's not coming to Winnipeg, but that the Jets are trying their hardest to fill that 2C void, probably beef up their defense, right, with another top end right shot defenseman, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see, because I would you know what, Dave, if I was to put a percentage on it, I would say it's 50-50 right now whether they make that pick. I really believe that, because if you are going to address some of the needs on your team via trade, like I said, that first round pick, 8th overall, is a big thing that teams are looking at. Also, there's an option that the Jets move up. We've talked about it, right? Whether that's San Jose at 2nd overall or Chicago at 4th overall, maybe the Jets decide, they're going to use that 8th overall pick and trade up to get like an Ivor Stenberg, for example, or a Carson Carrolls. We're not sure. But I think for the first time in a long time, that 1st round pick for the Jets is in play around the draft. Not in play around the trade deadline, in play around the draft.
Now, you mentioned something that's interesting, Ezzy. Like, do you see a benefit for them to move up? Because I mean, again, that means you're most likely, I guess you're probably trading away an additional prospect as opposed to a roster player. But the fact of the matter is, like, I guess is the jump so sufficient to get from 8th to 4th or 8th to 2nd? Because I guess what I'm wondering is, what's the rationale? Like, is the rationale you're doing that?
I think it's simple, Dave. I think it's, if you really want a player, then and you know that he's not going to be available at 8th overall, that's why you're trading up. Like Vigo Bjork, for example. Like I would imagine, Dave, like obviously this is hypothetical, but I would imagine if the Jets do move up, it probably wouldn't be as high as 2nd overall. It would be like to 6th or 5th. And the reason why I say that is, like, Vigo Bjork is a guy that I think has to be, for the Jets amateur scouting staff, they have to be thinking, if Vigo Bjork is there at 8th overall, we're taking him. But what if they're, who has the 5th overall pick? New York, I think.
Rangers, yeah.
The Rangers have 5th overall pick. So let's say that the Jets know
I believe
that the Rangers have 5th or 6th. I know that.
Yeah. Calgary, no, Rangers are 5th, Calgary 6th.
Yeah, so whatever. So let's use Calgary, right? Calgary is the 6th overall pick. If the Jets become aware that Calgary wants to take Vigo Bjork, maybe the Jets move up. Now, I don't know exactly what you'd have to give up, if you'd have to give up another draft pick or you'd have to give up a prospect. I'm not really sure. But I would imagine it would be more, this is just my own opinion, right, Dave? But I would imagine that you would probably only move up 1 or 2 spots as opposed to 2nd or 4th. But again, the likelihood of that happening, we talk about this every year. Yeah. But the top picks are rarely traded, right? Like the Vancouver, Daniel Sedin, Henrik Sedin type of trades, right? That happen, don't happen, I should say, very often, right? So, but I just think it's going to be really interesting to see if the Jets use that pick. If you held the gun to my head, which I hope you wouldn't do, Dave, I would say that the Jets are going to use the 8th overall pick and they're going to get a really good player. But like I said, I'm not going to be shocked. And I think a lot of Jets fans won't be shocked if they move that pick to acquire a significant player that's going to improve their team big time.
So the question I have for you then, from jumping off of that, Ezzy, is if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you're making that pick, are you selecting a forward or a defenseman? Like, have you been leaning? I mean, obviously, look, we're being inundated right now.
Best player available. No, I'm just kidding, Dave.
I was going to that answer is not acceptable on our show.
No, I think, there's no goalies that are any, so it's obviously a forward or a defenseman, but I really think it depends on who goes. The organizational need is for sure up the middle, right? We know that.
Yeah.
The Jets have Sasha Boumedian. They have Alphonse Frey. Elias Salamonson is still, I think we would consider him a prospect, even though he's, I think, now established himself as an NHLer.
Yep.
So I don't know. Simply put, Dave, I don't know. I go back and forth. I know you're a big fan of Daxon Rudolph, and me too. If the Jets end up drafting Daxon Rudolph, there's going to be some people that say, well, he's not going to be in the NHL for a while because he's committed to play NCAA hockey. I'm forgetting who he's committed to, but
Denver.
There you go. So, and what a program to go to, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So Daxon Rudolph obviously is not going to step right into the NHL, but that also doesn't mean it's going to take him 5 years to step into the NHL either, right? So I'm kind of on the fence, right? Like I said, I think it depends on who goes, 6th overall, 7th overall. But we know, Dave, it looks like there's going to be more high-end defensemen available as opposed to centers.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at it. And if you look at, Doug, for the people on the podcast, ideally a guy that can play in your top 6 forward-wise, a top 2 center is the biggest need. And of course, the 3 forwards that folks are talking about are Caleb Malhotra, Vigo Bjork, and what's his name? Tynan from Boston University.
Yeah, and Dave, Running Man, we've got the comment up there for those listening on the podcast. Running Man says Rudolph, Smits, or Bjork. And we talked to Craig Button about Albert Smits, and Albert Smits, Button said that he might be the most ready for the NHL, right? Remember he said that?
Yeah.
So if you take a step back, the Jets could still get a player at 8th overall that plays in the NHL next year and is in theory productive, right? So if you look at it that way, I use Porter Martone, right, who went 6th overall. So 6th overall, 8th overall is close enough, I think, to be analogous, right? Yeah. So when I look at Porter Martone, he played college. Now I'm forgetting where Porter
Michigan
Martone
State.
Played. Michigan State. See, Dave.
Come on, Jim Slater's.
He went to college in the U.S. That's why you
Jim Slater's old school, has he?
Yeah. So Albert Smits could step into the NHL next year. Vigo Bjork, he's already played pro hockey in Sweden, right? So he could step into the NHL. There's other guys, like we said, Daxon Rudolph. He's a guy that's going to play at least one year for Denver before he turns pro. Maybe he'll play 2 years, but there's I think the chance that's a reason why I'm leaning towards the Jets making that pick, because I think, Dave, what we've seen in the last 5 to 7 years is that these 18-year-old kids are coming in more ready to play in the NHL than ever, right?
Yeah.
Like whether it's Macklin Celebrini, whether it's Matthew Schaefer, whether it's Porter Martone, like we just talked about, Michael Miza, whoever, like a lot of these guys are ready to come into the NHL as 18-year-olds, right? So it doesn't mean that the Jets are for sure going to get a player that contributes in the NHL next season, but I think that this year more than any other year, maybe they're looking at players that they think can step in sooner rather than later, I would say.
For sure. So then again, that leads me to think though, that like, if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you heard the words, and look, Connor Hellebuyck spoke them, or I should say didn't speak them for his 7 to 8 second pause, but he wasn't just speaking for himself. That was essentially for Mark Scheifele, Adam Lowry, Kyle Connor, Josh Morrissey, the entire veteran group, right? So we're here. We are. We've spent the last few minutes talking about the NHL draft and the Jets being the pick and the players that they could select. So how does this Jets team look differently next year with such a weak free agent class and the Jets not being a prime nizzle destination for free agents? How does this team look different enough to convince those players? And like I said, to start the show, you're anticipating there's going to be a bounce back from 3 or 4 guys who didn't have good years last year. But in addition to that, we know you needed to augment the roster. And you're hoping that guys like Danny Zhilkin, I would have confidence in Danny Zhilkin being up and being on the 4th line alongside Cole Koepke, and whether it's Morgan Barron or even Vlad Nemesnikov, like in some capacity, going that route and having what?
I want Chibrikov on that 4th line.
Well, I mean, you might get him. I mean, it's possible, right? But my point is that you've got these guys who are going to come up and they're going to try and make it, and that's the unknown. And everyone says, like, I can't stand when we talk about things as if people know it's a foregone conclusion. We don't know. We don't know. We didn't know that Adam Lowry was going to need hip surgery at the end of last season. We didn't know that was going to cost him the entire summer. We didn't know that Cole Perfetti would suffer an injury, a high ankle sprain in the last game or what it maybe wasn't the last game, but during the exhibition season. We didn't know that Dylan Sandberg was going to sustain an injury. So you can't go into it saying this is what's the fate already. It's not already decided. If you look
Dave, if that was the case, then people would have taken Brett Howden 1st round in their hockey pools.
Oh God, would they ever? But the point is, if you go back and you listen to the show from last year, the 3 of us were all unanimous in the sense that we said the Jets were a playoff team, which we were wrong about. But we also said that the Jets were going to take a step back, which we were right about. We just didn't get it quite as right as I think we thought it would be a 10 to 15 point drop, not a 34 point drop. But the fact is that I guess what I'm saying is that what I'm curious about is how does this Jets team look different enough to convince everyone, like, listen, this is what we needed to do in order to get us to that level, back to at least in the mix. I mean, look, if we've seen one thing, the number 1 team is not from the divisions are not there, right? You've got Carolina, you've got Vegas. Vegas slipped in. They were the first in their division, but they were middling for a lot of the year. And then they came on. Same with Florida, right? So when they won. So Edmonton wasn't even like really playing at their best game hockey for the last 2 years prior to this season, I should say, when they went into the playoffs. So, but I guess what I'm getting to you we're going to go to break because we're going to bring Christian Aumell of 680 CJOB to join us and talk about the Winnipeg Jets and the draft. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, I just don't see that there's going to be enough change to mollify the guys who basically said, we want to see some change because we don't want the status quo next year.
It's a very fair point, Dave. And that's why, Chevy's going to have to earn his salary this offseason, because he has a big task ahead of him, as we've talked about, right? Like, everybody knows the Jets need a 2nd line center, but the Jets also need to be beefed up in their top 6, top 9, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the Jets aren't running it back with, Nemesnikov, Perfetti, and Velarde, and they're not running it back with, Niederreiter, Lowry, Barron, and whoever on their 3rd line. You can't do that. I'm not saying that, Niederreiter's for sure gone, but I think he's a guy that, is definitely a buyout candidate or a guy that could be traded. And it's not just about Niederreiter. It's about the makeup of this team and how do you make this team not only younger, but faster, more skilled, and they need to score more goals, right? Like that was a huge issue on the team last year. And also the way this team defended, right? Like this team at times was easy to play against. A lot of the time were easy to play against. And we just didn't see that same shutdown defensive style that we've been used to in the previous years, right? So, the only way I can answer your question, Dave, is like looking at this team. Like, I still think like glass half full, the Jets core is still really good. Scheifele coming off of the career year. I mean, we know what the core of this team is. I don't have to, everybody who's watching the show or listening on the podcast knows who the core of this team is. So the core of this team is still good. I think, the complementary cast that is still remaining is good enough to get this team back into the playoffs. But like you said, if you don't bring in some impact players, then and you're only relying on internal improvements, like you said, Brad Lambert, Isak Rosean, players like that, Danny Zhilkin, I don't think this team's going to be viewed as a team that can contend for a Stanley Cup. But if you're able to bring in that coveted second line center and you're able to beef up your defense on the right side, then, we're talking, but that's going to require Chevy to pull off some big trades. Because like you said, Dave, I don't think anybody's expecting the Jets to acquire Alex Tuch, who's considered one of the top free agents. And it's not a good free agent class, no. By the way. Or like a guy like Anthony Mantha could be available. I don't know why Pittsburgh wouldn't keep Anthony Mantha. But again, like, I don't think that anybody's expecting the Jets to address their issues via free agency. So it's got to be via trade. But yeah, I mean, you have to answer your question, Dave, bluntly, like you have to bring in significant pieces or you're just going to be a middling team.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're not a middling team here on Illegal Curve. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezra Ginsberg. Christian Aumell will join us on the other side of the break. Your job right now is, while we go to commercial and listen to our sponsors, is smash the like button. That didn't work. As it didn't work. I don't know what I just did. Somehow I just changed the background and I didn't actually send us to commercial because I hit the wrong button.
I want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Center. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Center.
Boys, I've made an important life decision, and I need your support.
Oh, boy.
I've decided to get a grill.
You mean a barbecue grill for cooking? Like, that's not an important life decision, Ezzy.
No. A grill for my teeth.
A grill for your teeth? Do I even want to know why you're doing this?
It's simple, really. Every time I go to Holt Dental, I get treated so very well by Dr. John and his team that I need to keep finding additional reasons to go back. I rely on Holt Dental for all of my dental needs, and they do it all, from regular cleanings to cosmetic dentistry. Plus, they have free parking at their front door, and you know how much I love my convenient parking.
For all your dental needs, Illegal Curve recommends Holt Dental, conveniently located on Taylor Avenue near Grant Park Mall. For more information, visit them online at holtdental.ca. For over 40 years, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has been Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy. Renowned in the comedy world as a must-play venue, Rumors has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers, wedding socials, and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase show tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Now, as I've got the controls ready to go, I know what I'm doing, and we're going to bring in Christian Aumell of 680 CJOB. He is going to join us for some Jets talk as soon as he gets his camera ready to go. He's got his jersey ready to go. Folks will like it. He's wearing his Sea Bears jersey. So, Christian Aumell of 680 CJOB, how are you this morning? Thanks for joining us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Yeah, I'm good. It was very loud hearing you guys, so I was trying to turn the volume down there. So. I like you guys, but like there's a certain point where my ears might hurt. So, yeah, Seabears big win last night, won by 20 against Calgary. Big second half for them on CJOB. We do pretty much all the home games, so it was a good environment. Almost 8,000 people there. So I thought, normally I wear a hockey jersey on the show, but since hockey season's pretty much over, I might as well transition into something else.
Christian, I listened to you and Kelly, and you guys did an amazing job as you always did. And like you said, big victory for the Sea Bears. Calgary remains undefeated, but I thought you were getting winless is what I meant to say.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how they remain undefeated as if they lost last night.
Yeah, no, sorry. That was a Freudian slip. Come on, guys. But Christian, I'm a little bit disappointed. I thought you were going to do the show live from the Tundra buggy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. A new thing they've got. They've built their like a custom party buggy that they have set up on the one end of the floor, kind of where the party zone is, and it looks like one of those buggies you'd find in Churchill. So if you ever go to a game, check that out because it's definitely unique.
Well, we'll make the transition from the Winnipeg Sea Bears to the Winnipeg Jets because we want to get your thoughts on the state of the local NHL franchise, Christian, and what you're thinking, and what kind of maybe we started off the show with our thought about Hellebuyck and kind of the noise, and regardless of the factual nature of the rumors, because we don't have to discuss whether there has or hasn't been a trade request or not because we don't know, so can't report on something like that. But is this a move that it's time to make? Is it time to say like he's going to be better off with another franchise, and the return you're going to get for him is going to really, of all the players that the Jets could trade, they're not getting more than they are for Connor Hellebuyck. He will bring back the most, I think, in a trade right now. So from your perspective, is that something this organization is doing, or is this a conversation we're having next summer if they have the same level of lack of success as they did this year?
See, everyone seems to say that Hellebuyck gives them the best return. I think it's Morrissey. Personally, I'm of the opinion that Josh Morrissey would give them the best. And I'll answer your question. I just want to touch on this because I keep hearing people say Hellebuck's the biggest asset.
I could see you kind of pausing when I was saying it, thinking, I'm not sure I agree.
Hellebuck's 33, right?
Yeah.
Morrissey is several years younger and has got a very small contract. Now, I guess the flip side is you're going to have to pay him like 11 or 12 million per season,
exactly,
in a year or two. So that's the other side of it. But younger, and I feel like the playoffs this year have proven, and I think we do see this quite reasonably often. You don't need the best goalie in the league to win the Stanley Cup. You saw the Vezina Trophy finalists. You have Vasilevsky, Tampa Bay. If they were, if they had Hedman, they had a healthier team, may still be playing, who knows, but Logan Thompson didn't make the playoffs. Ilya Sorokin didn't make the playoffs. Connor Hellebuyck, Hart Trophy winner last year, his team didn't make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And he's been the best goalie inarguably in the league for a while now, and he's been to the West Final once, and it was 8 years ago. Yeah. So we've seen Darcy Kemper lead a team to the Stanley Cup. We've seen Antti Niemi lead a team to the Stanley Cup, right? Good goalies win the cup. Like Vasilevsky's won 2. Jonathan Quick was awesome. He's won 2. Corey Crawford with those Blackhawks team was really good. He won 2, right? But Binnington got hot, won a cup as a rookie, and has been really not amazing ever since, right? And that was 7 years ago. So I just remember, like, goalie trades are so rare in terms of like big name goalies. I think of that Ryan Miller trade to St. Louis back in the day, and how they didn't get a ton for him, and it didn't work for St. Louis.
Right.
We don't, the goalie moves often. I guess it's because people don't trade goalies ever, right? They usually get dealt or move on after their heyday is over. In terms of should the Jets move Hellebuyck, it's a simple question of what is your organizational philosophy in this very moment, right? If the Jets take a big swig of reality juice, I think they will realize probably that the best thing, if you're taking the odds, you're looking at around the league, you look at who's on your roster, if they accept that the best they're going to be is just, 7th in the West, 8th in the West, you get into the playoffs, you roll the dice, you hope. It doesn't seem like a great strategy, that the best we could do is just get into the tournament and then anything can happen. Then what you do is you trade Hellebuyck, but then you trade more. So you trade Scheifele, you trade Connor, all of them. If you trade one, I think you trade them all. Because I think at that point you're saying we're done. This era, this core didn't do it. Let's reset. I'm not saying they're not going to do that. I would be stunned if they did that. I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing to do, but I just, if you're going to probably accept that the league has passed this team a little bit, then that's a move that you have to think about doing. The question is, has the league actually passed this team, right? Was it just a 1-year anomaly and they can get back to not a President's Trophy winning team, but certainly a team that can really push the other teams in the West? Or was that the anomaly? Because they were good the year before in terms of regular season points. They're building. They have the President's Trophy season, and now it's over, right? There's a decent chance it's over. And if you're the Jets and you accept that, then you trade Hellebuyck. But I don't think we're going to see that personally.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Christian. And obviously the draft is coming up. The 2026 draft is coming up in just less than 2 weeks, starting Friday night. The Jets hold the 8th overall pick, and a lot of people are speculating, including us and including Jets at Noon and on the CJOB Sports Show. Everybody's speculating about who the Jets might take at 8th overall. But do you think the Jets make that 8th overall pick? And if they don't make the 8th overall pick and they move it, what are they moving it for?
So I believe they should make that pick. I believe that it is prudent for this team and its long-term success to make that pick. If I'm a Jets fan, I'm maybe not the most confident in the Jets to get the pick right, simply because the history recently of drafting by this team has not been spectacular. And it's hand in hand, drafting and developing, right? They've made picks, they've gone to the Moose, and maybe the development hasn't been as great as you would hope. But there's also the recognition that there's a difference between drafting 30th overall and drafting 8th overall, right? This is the highest pick they'll make in a long time since Patrick Laine was picked 2nd overall, right? That was a decade ago. They've been picking in the teens or the 20s pretty much ever since, save for Cole Perfetti, 10th overall in 2020, which if you go back and look at that top 10, not a lot of teams got it right in 2020, right? The COVID draft was a weird one. And the top 10, if you did a redraft of that draft, would look maybe almost more different than any redraft of the last 10 to 15 years, because Tim Stützle 3 is probably number 1 overall now, but Seth Jarvis, who went a couple picks after Perfetti, might be top 3, top 4 based on how it's gone for him in Carolina. And yes, you could go back and be like, man, maybe Winnipeg should have picked him, but anyway, you could do that with every draft with every team pretty much.
Yeah.
In terms of number 2, if they did move him, what would they or move the pick? What would they move it for? I think there's 2 ways to look at this. One, you could move back. You could trade an 8 for like 2 late first round picks if you felt like the draft was deep enough, and you could get 2 decent guys instead of 1. I think that's the only one I would do if I were the Jets. I'd make the 8th pick, but I've said this before. The only player I am trading the 8th overall pick for is Robert Thomas. And I don't think the Blues do that. I don't think the Blues are going to trade him, period. I certainly don't think they're going to trade him to Winnipeg because that's a in-division rival. I don't think that would be a smart move, or not necessarily a smart move. I just don't think that's a move the Blues would do. Though that, Doug Armstrong's moving on, Alexander Steen's coming in, and maybe they just do things differently when that happens, right?
I mean, he was born in Winnipeg, Christian. Maybe he wants to help out as the team he grew up.
I have doubts about that, but I just can't see it being worth it for a player to come into this team, because in terms of who's available, right? It's a pretty slim market. So Robert Thomas, I think, solves a decent number of problems for this team. But also, does that make them a contender? Not entirely sure. So I think they should make the pick, and then pick your, there's a decent group of players that could be at number 8 that people have been speculating about, but it'll come down to who's available at that time, and if the Jets do make that pick, what they feel the best move is for their organization.
Well, so jumping off that thought, then, Christian, if you are making you're making the pick 2 weeks from now, or I guess 13 days from now, what does that say about your organizational movement? Because, again, part of the conversation Ezra and I were having before you joined us was this idea that the Jets are basically straddling two sides. You've got the wanting to have the draft and development side, and of course the win now side. But the win now side isn't sufficient, even as, my statement was that you'll have bounce back from 3 or 4 guys who had really down years last year. So you have the bounce back from them, even though some of the guys are aging. Let's go on the presumption that they can bounce back. Look, with what Jordan Stahl's doing in the playoffs right now, we know the guys who are in their late 30s still can have an impact on the game. But from your perspective, if you're going to make the pick, what does that say for your group? Which, again, that comment by Connor Hellebuyck wasn't just from him. It was about the veterans on this team wanting to win. So we look at the free agent class. It's incredibly weak. We know that the Jets aren't ever high on the list of acquisitions. So what does that say about your group? Because you're talking about an organization that wants to win, but also has to develop because they need those prospects, because they can't get the guys in free agency.
Well, there's a guy playing with Jordan Stahl, I think, that's really helping him out. It's really elevating his game. It would be cool if the Jets could have someone like that to play with some of their veterans and really boost their point totals. And I don't know, like you see Nemestikov a couple of years ago had these higher point totals, and anyway. I think that losing Ehlers, we're going to look back and be like, that was the start of the end for this, perhaps, right? Because he was just such a dynamic player that they just couldn't figure out how to use properly. And part of this is just emblematic of the Jets' problems in having perhaps just too many guys in certain spots that blocks the best possible guy for that spot. And we've seen that with, Elias Salamonson last year, and it took a long time to get him in. And Luke Schenn was, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to recognize that Luke Schenn wasn't really helping them win hockey games for a lot of last season. But we saw it at the trade deadline too, this idea of kind of walking two paths at once, right? Where they trade away Schenn and Stanley and Pearson, and they get Roseanne, they get a second, and Bryson, he's probably gone. But they still were trying to win. Right. They still were they didn't. I'm sure they probably would have liked to have traded other guys, but I imagine the market for an injured Dieter Reiter and a kind of injured Nemestikov wasn't much. But they bring the young guys in. Salamonson gets hurt, unfortunately, at the end, but he was really good. Lambert showed decently well. Roseanne had some good spots too, and they started actually play faster and started winning more hockey games. And I don't think that's a coincidence, right? So I think, having youth in the lineup, having speed in the lineup is a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. They just have to do that because the last year's team was just simply too old and too slow. There's no way around it. They have to learn from their mistakes of how they've been building this team the last couple of years. The players they have added have all been pretty much slow. Tanev has some speed, but Schenn was very slow. Pearson, Nyquist, Taves last offseason simply did not help this team at all. In fact, set them back, right? The Taves homecoming story was a nice story. He had some good moments, but ultimately the idea that he could be a second line center, I said at the time, was asking too much of him. Clearly that was true. And we don't expect him to come back. The expectation is he'll retire. And Nyquist is gone and Pearson is gone. And the problem they have is that everybody is signed already, pretty much. They could ice a team now with all the guys they have under contract, and that's before they sign Perfetti and Roseanne, 2 RFAs to contracts, right? They have guys that did not do the job last year are still here, right? And you got a year left of Domestikov, you got a year left of Niederreiter, who, yes, were hurt. You got Lowry, who's coming back from his injury, and Perfetti started to look a lot better as he came back from his injury. But to assume that everybody bounces back, to assume that everybody's going to be healthy, it feels like a lot to ask, while also recognizing that you've got a lot of guys who were born in 92, 93, 94, right, as your main core. They have a lot, more than half of the players they have under contract for next year are either 30 or turning 30 this year, right, with Connor and Fleury turning 30 this year. So that's a problem. And how you solve it is, I think you have to have young players in the lineup. I think Lambert has to be an NHLer full-time. Sucks that Salamonta won't be ready for opening night, probably, but he's got to be one of their top 6. And then they just have to be a little bit more imaginative in how they put this together, right? And instead of relying on veterans that we can see are fine at best, I think they have to take some more risks with giving young guys chances to fail. And we saw that with Salamonta in the second go-round. The first go-round didn't go great. The team was playing terribly. He wasn't good. He comes in the second time and is awesome, right? This isn't to say that everybody's ready. He was their top prospect, and he played well. Jaeger comes in, didn't really get a great sample size. But I don't think that Nemestikov and Niederreiter are going to super help this team. I think they're jamming it up a little bit. It's just to say that they have to buy them out seems harsh, but I feel like they have to buy them out. I think they need to create room on this roster, or those guys end up, Niederreiter and Nemestikov buried in the minors, who put them on waivers. What do you do with 34-year-olds? They each have 1 year left. I think buyouts with the cap going up aren't really going to hurt them salary cap wise. Look, Vegas has shown that you need to be bold, and this isn't to say that you're going to burn the bridges. You don't have to be that bold like Vegas, right? Everyone hates them for a variety of reasons, but the Jets are so far the other way because it's so different, right? Vegas, people want to go there. It's a tax-free state. It's hot all the time. There's a lot to do. Winnipeg's not those things, right? We know that. We live here. We understand it. We love it, and the players that come here love it, but there's a perception, right? And that's not going to change. So I understand that Chevy's working from a disadvantage in that point. But the status quo isn't working. The way they have put this team together with all these caveats in mind has garnered them what? A President's Trophy, cool. Jennings trophies a couple times, nice. But you play to win the game, right? It's all about winning the cup. It has to be about winning the cup. It can't just be we were good in the regular season. We finished second in the Central. We lost in round 1 to Colorado in 5 games. They've been to the West. I always come back to they've been to the West Final once, ever. It was 8 years ago. It'll be at least 9 years between West Final appearances. That basically was this core on the come up, made the West Final, and since then they have not done enough, right? 2019, they lose in round 1 after cratering down the stretch. 2020 was weird. It was COVID. They lose in the qualifying round. They started to turn it around. Who knows what would have happened? 2021, really weird series. They sweep the Oilers, but then they get swept by the Habs, miss the playoffs in 22. The Vegas 5-gamer in 23 that had Rick Bowness losing his mind. 24, they lose to Colorado in 5. They got absolutely destroyed. They barely beat St. Louis in a Miracles Game 7, and then they lose to Dallas and score barely any road goals, right? It's just year after year after year of they're not winning the cup, and they're not really coming close. So if the goal is to win the Stanley Cup, and you're just going to make a couple minor tweaks, I mean, I think most of us recognize that's probably not going to get the job done. And so what are you? Are you a team that's just going to be forever, and then everyone gets old, and then you start to have nothing? Or do you make the moves now with guys that aren't quite done yet? You're not going to win the cup. Give them a chance to go win, stock your cupboards, and be able to keep up with the rest of the league. I went all over the place there. That was like 5 minutes. I'm sorry. But I just vomited all my Jets thoughts out there.
Oh, that's all good. That's why we brought you on, Christian. And you mentioned Cole Perfetti earlier, and I've been bringing him up for the last 4 or 5 weeks because it seems like, I'm not saying that on CJOB you're not talking about Cole Perfetti, but it seems it's the contract talk is a little bit more quiet than I thought it was going to be. Do you see a situation where Cole Perfetti signs a shorter term contract, like a 1-year deal, or do you think it's going to be kind of in that 4 to 6 year range? Like Dave says 5 years, I said 4 years. But it's a really interesting one because Perfetti's coming off of a down year in which he obviously had the high ankle sprain. But I don't know. Don't you feel like this one's a difficult one to predict?
Yeah, because he had signed a short one, right? And it kind of feels like he's, the betting on yourself idea. But then the season doesn't go great. So I'm thinking he takes another opportunity to bet on himself, right? To double down and be like, all right, I didn't show it there. Let me try one more time here. I know the Jets' history has been to sign guys long-term at this point. I know what we saw with Sandberg was the most recent example, right? Not a super long-term deal, but not, 1 or 2 year deal. I think we are going to see not a 1 year for Perfetti, but I could see 2 or 3. I don't think it's going to be long. I think 4 would probably be
Christian. 3, I believe, takes him to unrestricted free agency, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that I think it's going to be a 3 or a 4. I think it's going to be shorter on that end. I think the Jets would love to lock him up, but I'm guessing the number they're going to give Perfetti, given his production at this point, is probably not one Perfetti wants. So I don't think this goes to arbitration or anything like that, but I don't think it's going to be a long deal just because I think Perfetti wants to have another chance to show. The one argument would be, all right, well, if you're injury prone, then you lock in, right? And you say, you know what? Let's just get the security. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. It's tough to predict, right? But I would lean towards kind of that middle length deal. Not quite maybe a bit longer than what you consider a bridge, but definitely not like a long-term pact. And I think that we're seeing that in the NHL, right? We're seeing it more common where guys are signing kind of that middle length deal, right? Guys in their 30s, they're going 6 and 7, right? Mm-hmm. Because this is their last contract. And often by the end of them, they're probably going to look pretty bad and be buyout candidates. Like Michael McCarron signing a 6-year. It's like, is Minnesota going to be paying that when he's 37? That seems like it's going to be a lot, but it's for 3-point-something million. It's not that big a deal, but I think, I'm probably in the 3 to 4 year range for Perfetti.
Christian, one of the things that I heard in your previous answer was this idea of the Jets needing to maybe perhaps change their philosophy. So that is the question I will kind of pose to you specifically: is there a requirement from this organization to have a philosophical change in terms of how they play their young guys? Because again, there was a lot of sort of parallels to the way the Detroit Red Wings used to do it, which is stick your guys in the minors, let them overbake, then bring them up when they're more than ready, and then you can throw them into the pro roster. Now, we've seen that cost them guys like Johnny Kovacevic. It's cost them guys like Declan Chisholm and others because they'll bring in a Nate Schmidt and a Brendan Dillon, and then of course you block the route for guys and try and send them down and get claimed on waivers. But from your perspective, is there a need to give Jagr a long look at to see after just 1 year as a pro in hockey playing with the Manitoba Moose? You had 30 points in I think 68 games for the Manitoba Moose. Are you prepared to say, hey, you know what, maybe they need to do that with a guy like Braden Jagr? And I mean, Brad Lambert's not even waiver exempt anymore, so he's going to be with the club or he's going to be on a new team. But from your perspective, is there a philosophical change that needs to happen with this team or this organization, that they're not leaving their guys down in the minors? And look, Jagger's not being left down. He's only played 1 year as a pro, but just that sort of concept.
I think the answer is inarguably yes. I don't know if that also therefore means that Jaeger has to try the season at 2C. I don't think that both things have to be yes, but I think you just look at how this team came to be really good in the first place, right? And they mixed veterans with young guys that were able to make that leap. And it's not the same situations now, right? Because the Jets had a lot of top 10 picks, and they haven't had that because they were good with that young core, right? 2018, the best season they've had in terms of playoff results. They had veterans like Little and Bufflin, who is a unique player that they have not replaced, and Wheeler, the captain. But, not just Scheifele, but a young Ehlers, Laine in his second season, and Josh Morrissey, a young guy, Jacob Trouba, a young guy, but these are all top 10, top 15 picks, right? And now those guys get older. They don't have those amazing draft picks to replenish, so it's lower down the draft pick order. The emphasis still has to be really, really firmly on draft and develop. They trade first-round picks away to try and stay in the mix. They obviously didn't keep any of the guys they traded those first-round picks for, which hurts them. But I think what we've seen is, okay, the last 5 to 6 years, they've been a pretty good team, but they haven't come close to winning the Stanley Cup. And so, okay, that didn't work. Let's not do the same thing again. They also have to recognize that a lot of their core guys are the oldest they've been. And so instead of bringing in veterans to supplement, which has been their strategy over and over and over again, like the Schmitz, like the Dillons, and then like last season, even the trades for Niederreiter and Nemestikov, who had some pretty good moments for this team. Those were not mistake moves. They got them for pretty cheap, and they did well for a good amount of time. But, bringing in the Pearsons and the Taves and the Nyquists, and you can go down the list in terms of veteran guys that have been put in the lineup, like Anderson Dolans and Axel Jonsson-Fialbi and Dominic Toninato, these Moose tweener guys. And, I think of guys like Lucas Pisa and Anthony Boteto and Nathan Beaulieu that are playing over top of the younger players, some of whom end up going on waivers, and Ville Heinola, who's going to probably end up either in a different NHL market or in Finland after the free agents period is opened, because I can't imagine him coming back to this team. And so you lose guys because you didn't. I don't know if I want to say didn't handle it properly, but it might be too harsh. But so you look ahead to the future and you say, okay, well, is the best thing for this team Hayden Fleury playing? That's another 30-year-old who's fine, but can you put a young guy in there instead? The one issue there might be their defensive prospect depth after Salamonson is not spectacular. You look up front. Do you want to go with just a Niederreiter and a Nemestikov that can be okay, but are going to be here for 1-2 more years? Or do you have to start looking beyond just this year? And I think you do. And so I think that means you do have to give the keys to younger players. You do have to give them opportunities to fail, right? Because it's not necessarily going to go well right away. These guys need reps. And I think there are ways you can look at the Moose. Yeah, they won a playoff series. They had their best year in a little while this year. But it was mainly because of a lot of veteran kind of tweener guys and not so much their young players elevating. Dave, you follow them a lot closer than pretty much any of us do. But you look at Jaeger. Is he ready? I don't know. But giving Barron an opportunity higher in the lineup, giving guys with speed opportunities higher in the lineup. I think you just have to try it, right? This team doesn't try stuff. Right. And I think that's one of the big issues I have with following them on a regular basis and just seeing them try the same thing over and over. And, oh, look, they switched Filardi and Iafallo. Wow, again, that was their big switch. Cool. And that's why, that's a big reason why Ehlers isn't here anymore. They didn't try him in top line opportunities. He had, I think the 9th highest 5-on-5 time on ice in the President's Trophy season. Like, they trusted other guys ahead of him, and that's part of why he wanted to leave, right? He wasn't given those opportunities. And yes, he's not on the top line in Carolina. They kind of roll out 3 lines that are all basically playing the same amount of time. And he's out there in big situations. He's killing the end of games. They just don't have anybody dynamic like that, but they also don't have anybody waiting in the wings too, right? That's one of the issues. Lambert is not Ehlers. Lambert's a solid prospect who I think will definitely help them in their speed game. I think he should be on the second line. You look at Connor Scheifele, Velarde as a top line. Can Barron be a second line player? I don't think so, but I don't think he's got the offensive ability to be a second line center. But is a resurgent Lowry with Perfetti and Lambert something like we're seeing with Stahl now, playing with a guy like Ehlers and Jarvis? Like that could be something. And then you've got Barron in the middle on a third line, and then you've got a bajillion guys. I think I'd probably just make up a fourth line, but I just think you need imagination to succeed, and we just haven't seen enough of this from this team, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's the front office. I understand that the moves from the front office point of view are limited in terms of the guys that want to come here, which means you need to nail drafting and developing, which they are not doing. So I think overall, as the Oscar music starts to play for me in my head, the longer this offseason has gone, the more I think they might be toast. It's very cynical. I understand that. But I do think that if they run it back, they can make the playoffs. They could even catch fire in a bottle, right? It's possible. It's hockey. We see that, right? This year, the best teams went all the way, and that doesn't always happen in hockey. Florida was an 8 seed in 2023. They made the cup, right? We've seen 8 seeds make the cup before. It's not uncommon. Mm-hmm. But to bank on that, for that to be the best case scenario, doesn't inspire a lot of hope for me.
Christian, before we let you go, we have a big question for you. As you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, the Stanley Cup playoffs are still going on.
Yep.
June 13th. It's hard to believe that a Stanley Cup final is still going on. Maybe not so much because this is usually when it ends.
This actually feels kind of early, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say that's, it might even be early. But does Carolina wrap it up tomorrow? And if they do, or whether Vegas wins or Carolina wins, who is your favorite right now for the Conn Smythe? Because I think it's more wide open than some people might. I think some people are saying Mitch Marner, even if Carolina wins. But are you where do you fall? Does Carolina wrap it up, and who's your Conn Smythe winner?
Well, first of all, trying to predict anything in this series is a fool's errand because it has been unpredictable. Game 5 was the most normal game we've seen by far in this series. And even the team scoring first lost, right? Like we've seen 2-goal leads evaporate all over the place. It has been, by many metrics, one of the best Stanley Cup finals we've ever seen, right? And I know that Carolina, Vegas, they're not two franchises that have a lot of juice historically. So that might limit it in some people's eyes. I know the ratings in Canada have not been great. In the States, they're doing really well. But I thought it's been incredibly entertaining. I think if you just objectively look at the hockey and the chaos and the number of goals scored, it is fantastic stuff. It kind of feels like it deserves to go 7, the way this has gone and the craziness. But Carolina's been such a good road team. And it might just be like the Bussy thing. And all of a sudden you put Bussy in and you just win the Stanley Cup. It could just be that, right? And I think Carolina has been such an impressive team on the road that where the game is being played doesn't matter. I want Carolina to win. I've made no bones about that on my show. Mostly for 2 reasons. 1, I want to see Ehlers win a cup. And 2, I absolutely do not want to see the Vegas Golden Knights win the cup. Mostly cheering against Vegas more than I'm cheering for Carolina. It says Jarvis winning the cup would be cool too. But Vegas, they've won it already. This is only year 9 for them. There's jealousy. Of course there is, because sports is suffering. At its core, sports is suffering. And Vegas hasn't had to do that, right? Those fans have had it really nice their whole time. So there's certainly an envy, and how dare you get this all right away when we've had to sit here and go through this forever. But also Carter Hart. I don't want to, I've enjoyed seeing him be the first goalie ever to give up 4 goals in each of the first 5 games of the Stanley Cup Final. But your question was who's going to win, and I'm leaning like 52-48. Carolina finishes it off tomorrow night, but it also feels like 7 is the right, like for this to be the best series ever, it has to go 7. So I won't mind it if it goes 7, but I will mind it if Carolina loses in 7. So I'm okay with them wrapping it up tomorrow night. In terms of Conn Smythe, I mean, it's tough because it is the playoff MVP, right? And if it was the finals MVP, it's Jordan Staal.
Mm-hmm.
But most of his production in the playoffs has been in the final. I think the first 3 rounds, the Stankoven, Hall, Blake line was their best line. But they haven't produced a ton in the final. So what do you do with that? Aho, Svechnikov have barely done anything in the playoffs. They just each got their 10th point on in Game 5. But it's the easiest thing is always to give it to a goalie. But you can't this year, right? Absolutely not. None of the goalies qualify. So Marner, I don't think this isn't the kind of McDavid 2024 run where you give it to a losing player. I don't think it's that far and ahead of everything. The reason why that happened too is because there was no one guy in Florida, right? Florida was such a deep team with a lot of guys that were doing a lot of things that it was almost easier to just give it to McDavid because his point totals were ungodly. Marners aren't ungodly. They're really good. So I think the winning team gets the Conn Smythe. And I think if I were a voter for Carolina today, I think I'd give it to Logan Stankoven without looking at the stats and looking at the odds, just off watching their games. I think I'd give it to Stankoven because they're 10-0 when he scores in the playoffs, right? Like that's an incredible number. They've won 15 games. He's scored 10, or he's got goals in 10, and they've won all those games. So I think that stat in itself, especially if he scores in the winning game, I think I'd lead Stankoven right now. But it's certainly not clear cut. The odds have been changing significantly based on every game's result, right? So it's been an awesome final, and I hope Carolina wins.
Yeah, and just quickly, Dave, I was going to say I'm with you, Christian. I think if Carolina wins, it's going to be Stankoven or Taylor Hall, and I think Taylor Hall would be just an incredible story, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because he's obviously bounced around a little bit from Edmonton to New Jersey to Carolina, right? So
he was in Boston for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think Stankoven would be a really good choice as well. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Mitch Marner wins it, if Vegas wins it, right?
Well, if Vegas wins,
yeah.
Yeah, no, Marner's getting it if Vegas wins. I don't think there's any doubt there. Unless Howden scores like 5 goals in the next 2 games.
I was going to say, Brett Howden of Oakbank's Brett Howden's been pretty darn good as well for what he's done. Well, Christian, we appreciate your joining us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. He is Christian Aumell of 680 CJOB. Thanks a lot, Christian.
My pleasure, guys.
See you in the Tundra buggy.
Will do.
As you will see Christian in the Tundra buggy. We will thank Christian for joining us and sharing his insight this morning on the program. We'll head to commercial. Ezzy, I'll hit the right button this time. We'll head to commercial. When we come back, Ezzy and I'll continue the hockey talk on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. And while you're waiting, smash that like button. Thanks very much.
I want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Center. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Center.
Boys, I've made an important life decision, and I need your support.
Oh, boy.
I've decided to get a grill.
You mean a barbecue grill for cooking? Like, that's not an important life decision, Ezzy.
No. A grill for my teeth.
A grill for your teeth? Do I even want to know why you're doing this?
It's simple, really. Every time I go to Holt Dental, I get treated so very well by Dr. John and his team that I need to keep finding additional reasons to go back. I rely on Holt Dental for all of my dental needs, and they do it all, from regular cleanings to cosmetic dentistry. Plus, they have free parking at their front door, and you know how much I love my convenient parking.
For all your dental needs, Illegal Curve recommends Holt Dental, conveniently located on Taylor Avenue near Grant Park Mall. For more information, visit them online at holtdental.ca.
For over 40 years, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has been Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy. Renowned in the comedy world as a must-play venue, Rumors has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers, wedding socials, and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase show tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. First hour out of the way. Actually, more than the first hour, as he went a little long with CJOB's Christian Aumell, but that's okay. We are not constrained by the radio timelines as here.
Time is just a construct, Dave.
It is just a construct that does not apply to us in this capacity. That is absolutely the case. Well, you started, or you ended the interview with Christian with a question about the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, and we'll get to some more prospect talk. Shane Malloy will be joining us in 17 minutes, and he is from Hockey Prospects Radio. Well, he's with a lot of different outfits, but Hockey Prospects Radio is one we know him from, and he'll be on to talk about the NHL Draft and, of course, players the Jets could select with that 8th overall selection. But, you know, as he touched on it, and Christian said it in his response to your question, the Stanley Cup Finals, even though you don't really have a dog in the race or a horse in the race, has been really good hockey. And it's been really enjoyable. And let's be honest, like, I mean, the Carolina comeback when they were down 4 goals, absolutely. I mean, they lost the game, but still, I mean, it was just a remarkable hockey game. And the last one was very entertaining. I mean, it's been very good hockey when you don't really have anything. And again, there's lots of Manitobans in it. So we're happy for everybody who's represented, either Winnipeggers or Brandonites or Oak Bankers and that sort of thing is. But what's your sort of takeaway through the first 5 games with Carolina holding a 3-2 series lead?
I agree with you, Dave. The Stanley Cup Final has been terrific. Like 10 out of 10, or at the very least, I'm going to give it like a 9.5 out of 10. Like you said, the 4-goal comeback, even though Carolina loses that game, was phenomenal. That was that game 3? Yeah, that was game 3 that Vegas won 5-4 because they won game 1 5-4 as well. And obviously, you mentioned Nikolai Ehlers, scoring the fastest goal to start a game in NHL Stanley Cup Final history. And then you've obviously got Jordan Staal, the first player since Yvon Cournoyer, the Roadrunner, one of my dad's favorite all-time players. Yeah, first player to score in 5 straight Stanley Cup Final games. Just incredible, right? Like Ehlers, 8 points in 5 Stanley Cup Final games, right? Back-to-back 3-point games for Nikolai Ehlers. But
which puts him in pretty lofty company. I think it was like Gretzky, Lemieux, McDavid. Like it was pretty good. It was a pretty good list that he joined.
No, absolutely. And the funniest thing is, Dave, I'm sure you saw this, but the funniest thing, well, maybe you didn't, but I think you saw it, was when Nikolai Ehlers was interviewed after Game 5, and he said that was one of his worst games, and he had 3 points, and he said he was worried about talking to his dad Hines after the game, right? So,
well, because remember, he got 2 penalties that are your least favorite penalty in the hockey game, the old puck over the glass delay a game.
Well, and one of them was in the 3rd period, right?
And one of them in the 1st period when they scored on.
Yes, that's right. It was that was the Dorofeev goal, right?
Yeah, from Eichel.
Yeah. Right. So pretty rare that you have a guy that gets 3 assists in a Stanley Cup Final game, takes 2 puck over the glass penalties, right? Yeah. Just kind of rare, but no, it's just the hockey's been incredible, right? All the games have been close. 2 of the games have gone to OT. We've seen it's just really great hockey that's being played, and I think after a very disappointing conference finals, that's what we talked about, right? We wanted to see like a close Stanley Cup final. And I said Carolina in 6. I also want to pat myself on the back. I did pick Carolina to win the Cup before the season started, Dave, which I wanted to get this in here today. Because we've been doing the show for 17 and a half years, we do a lot of predictions. And this would be my first, if Carolina wins, this would be my first correct Stanley Cup prediction since all the way back to 2015, because I document this.
Wow.
So I've been wrong every year since 2015 was, of course, who? Chicago won the Cup in 2015. So it has been 11 years, Dave, since I've picked the correct Stanley Cup final winner. But it just shows you how much parity there is in the NHL, right? Like you mentioned it earlier in the show. Vegas kind of limped into the playoffs, or at the very least, they were limping until sorry, I shouldn't say that. They were doing really well heading into the playoffs, but they were limping before John Tortorella took over, right?
Yeah, and they fired Bruce Cassidy.
Shout out to Daily Faceoff's Johnny Lazarus, who, by the way, has now felt the wrath of John Tortorella.
He joins your club.
And I know you saw the question. Like, I think that was a legitimate question. Carter Hart has been awful in the Stanley Cup final. Eight people has won a Stanley Cup. That was a valid question. And that's just Torts. I mean, Torts is just, if he doesn't like the question, he degrades the reporter, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, Johnny Lazarus of Daily Faceoff asked if John Tortorella was thinking of putting Aiden Hill in the lineup for Carter Hart.
Who's Vegas won the Stanley Cup with, right?
That's what I'm saying. So I thought it was a completely valid question, but we've had Johnny Lazarus on the show before, and I just thought, you know, from someone who got roasted by John Tortorella back in the day for asking him how many assistant coaches he had on the bench.
After a win.
That was after a win.
It was after a Rangers win, wasn't it?
Yes. I still can't find that clip. I've tried to find that clip, Dave, but it appears that it's been erased from the YouTube archives.
Oh, as you've created a challenge for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I would
say to me, he said, "What the hell kind of question is that?" Right?
No, he goes. So you were on one. He was answering a question over. He was looking this way, and then you were over on this side at the second. There was a second
to his
spitter.
left.
You were to his left, and you asked your question about how many. Why do you only have? I think it was why do you only have one assistant coach on the bench? Because most teams have at least 2, if not 3. And then he goes, "What was that? What the hell kind of question is that?" I think I'm quoting him accurately.
You know what? Like all joking aside with Torts, he's done an amazing job with the Golden Knights because we just mentioned it. Like, not a lot of people some people thought they were going to get knocked out in the first round, right? Mm-hmm. And they've gone all the way to the Stanley Cup final. And I'm not going to be shocked, Dave, if they force a Game 7. Like, no, I think Carolina, if Vegas wins Game 6, I think Carolina wraps it up at home. But it has definitely been a classic Stanley Cup final. And, you know, we talked to Christian Aumell about Jordan Staal a little bit, but if you're okay with it, Dave, I'd like to talk about him a little bit more because what Jordan Staal is doing, and we touched on it, right? Goals in 5 straight games. Like, you know, for a 37-year-old who has literally, you know, bled for the Carolina Hurricanes for years and years and years, it's just been incredible to watch, right? Like that goal. The first goal in Game 5, like the spin around Ehlers pass to Jordan Staal, like the second goal that he scored, like, you know, when he was diving and got it past Carter Hart, like Staal has just been phenomenal. And I really do think Staal embodies the Hurricanes. And
as he has face-off prowess, he's been unbelievable in the face-off.
Yeah, what is he at? Like 65% or something?
No, I think it was higher. He had one of the highest percentages in the last few years.
Right. So, I mean, I can understand just the fact that he's getting Conn Smythe consideration is incredible to me. I don't think he'll win it. Like we said with Christian, I think if Carolina wins the Cup, I think it's going to be Logan Stankoven or Taylor Hall who gets the Conn Smythe. Some people might disagree with that. I think, you know, arguably Nikolai Ehlers is in the conversation, Dave. He's up to what, 18 points now? 17, 18 points. Like, I don't necessarily think Ehlers is a front runner for the Conn Smythe, but he's been incredible. So I just think it's been a very, very entertaining Stanley Cup final. Lots of storylines. I've said this before. I think Rod the Bod Brindamore is one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the entire league. I'd love to see him hoist the cup again. And as you mentioned, like Seth Jarvis, it'd be great to see, Seth Jarvis bring the cup back to Winnipeg with all of his friends and family, right? And also, not to mention, Jordan Martinook is also from Manitoba. We should mention him, right?
Yeah.
So, Carolina, look, they've been the bridesmaid many times, right, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
And looks like they're gonna win their second ever Stanley Cup, and it's I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, to me, it's been really fascinating to watch for all the reasons you've outlined, Ezzy. And I think and I asked Mike Commodore, who I believe was the guy who was rattling the chains or doing whatever they do in Carolina. I think Mike Commodore.
The siren.
Sorry, I should have known that. But the fact is that I asked Mike Commodore. I said, "Look, how is Carolina going to win this series with Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov?" I almost said Evgeny Svechnikov, former Jets great Evgeny Svechnikov, but Andrei Svechnikov being as quiet as they've been. I mean, they haven't really done much. And, I thought Sebastian Aho's answer to Kyle after the game was pretty good, where he basically said, he goes, "I don't really care my own personal success. I just want to do whatever is, and that's not a surprising answer for this team to get a win." You could see when he scored, really nice goal, by the way, where he kicked it up he kind of guided it along his skates up to his stick and then put it into the back of the net. I mean, you saw after he scored how much impact that had. Obviously his first ever Stanley Cup Finals goal, I should say. So that was interesting to watch. And you're right. It's been a fascinating series. I mean, it's interesting in the sense that these are not two teams that particularly interest me. And yet I've been captivated by watching every single game, every minute of every single game as best I can. And so I've been impressed by it. I think that, like you said, a guy like Logan Stankoven, if Jets fans are wondering if Avigo Bjork is going to be able to handle himself and play with that dog, well, you're looking at a guy like Logan Stankoven, who's 5'8", 5'9", and
he's not big.
But when he was into the Dallas system, when he was playing for Texas, you watched him and he reminded me of a Jack Roslovic. I know Jack Roslovic never got to that level that he needed to, but when he was in the AHL, he dominated. When the Jets would play Texas and they play Logan Stankoven and Maverick Bourque, you're like, wow, these guys are like heads and tails right now above the rest of the prospects right now in the AHL. And so, yeah, it was clear that Logan Stankoven ends up being, he might be the best part of the trade that they got for the Rantanen trade. So a little bit of a shock that Carolina ends up with potentially the best part of that trade if they can help him get it done. And you're right, the Taylor Hall story, phenomenal, but Jordan Staal, I think, has been just an absolute warrior. And it's funny because Christian said, and he's right, the answer in his response, the Conn Smythe is supposed to be for the entire playoffs, not just for the final. But it does seem to be that right now, Jordan Staal is your front runner.
Yeah, but I'll say this much, Dave. I agree with you that there are these unwritten rules like that. I can't argue with you. It's based on all 4 rounds. Mm-hmm. But I think I can hear the argument that the Stanley Cup Final is the most important round. And what he's doing, it's not like Jordan Staal is just kind of playing well or really well. Like, he's dominating.
Oh yeah.
And like we said before, that stat to me is crazy, that he's the first player to score in the first 5 games of Stanley Cup Final since Yvon Cornway, I think in 1973.
Yeah, something like that.
1973, if my math is correctly, hold on, that's what, 33 years, Dave?
73?
No, that's 53
years. I'm like,
John
Ginsburg, the retired math professor, is so upset right now that his son can't do basic math.
53. No, well, that's a lot of addition there, or subtraction. I don't know, one of the two. But I just think it's incredible. And I wanted to also touch on this. I know we're going to bring Shane Malloy on in about 4 minutes. We don't have a lot of time to talk.
You'll wrap up the thought, then we'll go to commercial, and then we'll bring Shane Malloy on.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you thought about this, Dave, but I thought it was pretty funny that we had Kami on last week.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Mike Babcock news came out 2 days later.
Hilarious.
If we had Kami on after that news came out,
yeah,
that would have been the whole interview. Would have just been him roasting Mike Babcock. So it's pretty funny that I thought that Kami came on and then that Babcock news came out. I mean, all I'm going to say about the Babcock news is, or like, we don't know if he's going to be hired because there's this investigation going on, but
sure.
I just personally think it's hilarious that of all the coaches available, that's who they've landed on. Like a guy who hasn't even been in the NHL in 3 years. And, you know, we know how everything ended with him in Columbus, right? He didn't even get to coach a single NHL game. So I just think it's hilarious because I don't think he's the guy that's going to lead them to the Stanley Cup. And we know Connor McDavid's going to be gone after his contract expires, right? So, look, Edmonton, if you think Babcock's going to be your guy, then fill your boots. But I just think it's ridiculous considering, you know, what Mike Commodore has said about Mike Babcock, what Johan Franzen has said about Mike Babcock, you know, that whole issue with Mitch Marner in Toronto. But hey, the old boys club, right, Dave?
Well, right now we're an old boys club as well, Ezzy, but we are going to head to commercial break, our final break of this morning's Illegal Curve Hockey Show. And then on the other side, we'll be talking to Shane Malloy of Hockey Prospects Radio. He will share his insight on the 2026 NHL Draft coming up in 2 weeks' time. Illegal Curve will be hosting a watch party-esque type of thing for the first round, the Friday night. We'll be live. We'll hopefully have the Jets selection, 8th overall. We'll have some other prospects. And then, of course, on that Saturday. Well, we'll head to commercial break. Then we'll bring Shane Malloy on to talk about the draft.
I want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre.
Boys, I've made an important life decision, and I need your support.
Oh, boy.
I've decided to get a grill.
You mean a barbecue grill for cooking? Like, that's not an important life decision, Ezzy.
No. A grill for my teeth.
A grill for your teeth? Do I even want to know why you're doing this?
It's simple, really. Every time I go to Holt Dental, I get treated so very well by Dr. John and his team that I need to keep finding additional reasons to go back. I rely on Holt Dental for all of my dental needs, and they do it all, from regular cleanings to cosmetic dentistry. Plus, they have free parking at their front door, and you know how much I love my convenient parking.
For all your dental needs, Illegal Curve recommends Holt Dental, conveniently located on Taylor Avenue near Grant Park Mall. For more information, visit them online at holtdental.ca. For over 40 years, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has been Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy. Renowned in the comedy world as a must-play venue, Rumors has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers, wedding socials, and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase show tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He is Ezra Ginsburg, and we are proud to welcome Shane Malloy to the program. Hey, Shane, how are you?
Gentlemen, how are you today?
Oh, we're great. 2 weeks out from the NHL Draft. The excitement is palpable here in Winnipeg as folks have gone suddenly, as soon as the season ended, Shane, everybody was focused on every prospect the Jets could possibly select. So before we ask specifics about the 8th overall selection and some of the players who could be available, what's kind of your general sense on the 2026 NHL draft class?
Well, I think in terms of quantity, it'll probably be average, which means there'll be around 59 players will play more than 200 games. Then the quality, I really believe is going to end up being dictated by the defenseman. How many defensemen in that number of players goes on to play more than 200 games, particularly the defensemen in the top 15. If they end up being first pairing D, second pairing D, it'll add to the quality of this draft class, because from my perspective, it really drives through center and defense when it comes to draft class. And this year may be that year, not necessarily at the center, but really at the defense.
Well, and that this draft is reminding me of 2014, where Jets fans became laser focused on a player. 2014, they were laser focused on Nikolai Ehlers. They wanted him. And I remember they were tweeting at him. He's liking their tweets. They were getting excited. From this perspective, from this year, now it seems Viggo Bjork is the player that Jets fans. There's a lot of defensemen as well, and we'll get into those guys. But from your perspective, Shane, I'm curious. I mean, obviously we know the size limitations, but it seems like this player doesn't care about his size. What can you tell us about Viggo Bjork?
No, he certainly doesn't care about his size, and he doesn't think that he's 5'9", 5'10", and 180 pounds. He thinks he's 6'3". So he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's like a little Boston Terrier. He's nipping at your heels. He's in the fight. He plays. He's not a perimeter player, so he's inside the paint, and he makes the type of plays that his wingers are better around him. So he'll go in there and he'll hold pucks. And I think he's equal distributor as he is shooter, which makes him hard to defend. And he also, another thing I really appreciate about him is his giddy up when it comes off puck play. When you really start to track off puck game, generally a center in the NHL may only have the puck 5, 6, 7% of the time. And that's it. So anywhere from 93 to 95% of the time, you don't have the puck in your stick. So what are you doing to help your team win, whether your team has the puck or not? So his puck support and then his backtracking and helping the defense core out, I think, is obviously above his peer group as well. So take a look at, I know he's not as big as Nick Suzuki, but there's some Nick Suzuki qualities about Viggo Bjork that I really appreciate. And so that's a player, if at 8 overall, I certainly could see the Winnipeg Jets taking, and he would be a very value pick at that point.
Shane, I wanted to ask you about a prospect who I have your rankings, your Hockey Prospect Radio rankings here, and you've got him ranked 14th. His consolidated ranking on Elite Prospects is 10th. That's Ethan Belchetz of the Windsor Spitfires, big 6'5" winger. So I think you'd agree that he's an option for the Jets at 8th overall. Maybe 8th overall would be a little bit high for him, but what would the Jets be getting if they drafted Ethan Belchetz?
A big, massive power forward. Now, power forwards are rare. This isn't the 80s and 90s anymore, so those traditional power forwards really aren't built with any level of frequency. So anytime you can get somebody who's 6'4", 6'5", and 225 pounds that has that skill set, be able to score goals, to play down low, below the dots, and be that presence, and to be able to bang bodies and wear out defensemen, create time and space, because his ability to control the puck and puck management and be able to hold off defenders along the boards and around the net creates time and space for his teammates. So certainly it wouldn't be a choice of mine at 8, because I think there's defensemen available that are more valued. Look, I value defensemen higher than particularly wingers and even centermen. So if you look at, and I look at a historical standpoint, from 2006 to 2018, the first 13 years of the salary cap era, on average, only 16 defensemen in a draft class will go on to play more than 200 games. Mm-hmm. So that's only one defenseman for every 2 teams in a draft class. So if you can get a defenseman that you think projects as a first pairing defenseman, whether he's a number 1 or a number 2, grab him. Because look at the cost of acquisition, whether it would be in free agency or trade for a defenseman like that, they're off the charts. It's an astronomical pay, whether it's term and the salary or it's the acquisition of assets you have to pay in a trade. They're crazy. So for me, if you can get that player up front, you can always find wingers. Now, you don't necessarily can always find power wingers, obviously like a Nathan Belchez, but it's much easier to find skilled wingers than it is defensemen.
Shane, another player that Jets fans have been looking at, and I want to ask you about, is Daxon Rudolph. A lot of parallels to Josh Morrissey, Alberta kid, played Prince Albert. What's kind of your perspective on a player like Daxon Rudolph?
Well, Daxon Rudolph, I peg him as a big, strong, two-way defenseman that I think can be a D2. I'm not sure if he's a first number one defenseman. He could be, but I tend to be more conservative in terms of my projections moving forward. But I would put him in a high percentage of being a second pairing defenseman. And he can play push offense. He can be stout defensively, number one penalty kill, certainly could be on the power play. And he could end up at the NHL level. I think between his peer years of 23, 24 to 31, I certainly think he can be a guy that can log 25 minutes or more a game. So certainly a guy that you could build your defense core around. And I know Winnipeg has drafted a couple defensemen over the last couple of years, but nobody at this level of talent, like first pairing defenseman capability, are really rare. So he's certainly a guy that I would target.
Shane, a guy that seems like, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but because obviously you follow the draft a lot closer than I do, but it seems like a guy that's fallen down the rankings a little bit is Tynan Lawrence, and he's ranked number 11 on the Hockey Prospect Radio rankings, and he's obviously a center, and we know that the Jets' organizational need is at center. Why do you think he would be a good pick for the Jets at number 8?
I think he has the capability of being potentially a top-end second-line center in the NHL. So the difference between 8 and 11 in your first round is really insignificant. Now, at number 10 is my cutoff. So between 9 and 10, I go into a different tier of style of value of player. So Alexander Command, Tynan Lawrence, I consider them F4s. So they are top-end second-line centers in the NHL. So Tynan Lawrence reminds me, I don't like to use player comparables. However, I like to use stylistically comparables. I think stylistically he's very similar to Robert Thomas out of St. Louis in terms of how he operates in his game. And if given another full year in Boston University, I think he's going to be able to round out his game. I thought it was commendable of him of leaving Muskegon partway through the year, taking on a challenge, going into university, taking classes. And the difference between, and sometimes if you don't get a chance to watch college hockey on a consistent basis as well as CHL, you may not recognize the difference between the two. Average age of a CHL player is 18. The average age of an NCAA player is 21 and a half. So he goes from playing against boys at average 18 years of age to young men that are 21 or 22 years of age. And they're bigger, stronger, faster, more mature, and they play a more structured game. So what they really do against him is they take away his time and space. But you noticed once he got acclimatized to new line mates, new system, and less time and space, he was arguably their most consistent and reliable forward there at the end of the year, that last month. So I think that he has the capability of being a really good, if not elite, second line center. So certainly a player that, I think the Winnipeg Jets would target.
Well, a player I'm sure the Jets would be happy to target is Manitoba's own Carson Karls. And I'm curious as to what, we don't think he's going to be available for the Jets at 8th. Let's be clear, but just from your perspective, just how good is this young man? Seems to have a heck of a good head on his shoulders. That's for sure.
Oh, the Cowboy? Absolutely. He's my kind of player. I mean, all these defensemen are, he has the capability of producing offense, but stout, mean, hardworking defenseman who, again, very similar to Rudolph, is going to be capable of matching up defensively against top lines, particularly on the road. He's going to, he could be on a number one penalty kill. He could be on a power play unit and play 25 plus minutes a game as well. Bomb for a shot and tough as nails. So he would fit right into, the Manitoba, Winnipeg, that fan base is the type of players that they love, hardworking, no nonsense, honest, and coming to play. And, he has already advocated he would really love to play in a Canadian market, and he embraces that. So if for any reason he falls to number 8, I wouldn't be shocked that Mark Hillier and his scouts jump on top of getting Carson Karls at 8th overall.
Shane, you've got Albert Smith's ranked 9th overall on your rankings. We had Craig Button on a few weeks back, and he said that he thought Albert Smith's might be the most NHL-ready player in the draft. Well, first part of the question is, do you agree with that? And do you think that the Jets would possibly take him because they think he can be NHL ready? We know the Jets are a win now team. The Jets are definitely not, a team that's in the middle of a rebuild or anything like that. But what are your thoughts on Albert Smith and him being ready for the NHL next year?
I'd always I agree with Craig that he's probably of all the defensemen, he's the closest to being ready. I always caution about putting 18 and 19-year-old defensemen into the NHL. It's a cautionary tale because we've seen it happen so many times. Simply look at what happened in Chicago with Kevin Korchinski as a young defenseman coming in too early. That's not new. These things have happened in the past. So there's a laundry list of defensemen. Tobias Bjornfort with the LA Kings, it was a first-round pick, went in too early. So this isn't new. It's a very dangerous proposition to put defensemen into the NHL early. Reason I say that is defensemen at that age are still in an experimental phase. So they're still trying new things, and they have to be in an environment to allow them to make those mistakes. And when you put a defenseman who isn't quite ready to play in the NHL, but has the size and skating ability, and you can envision him there, what happens is they get into survival mode. And so they start changing their habits of how they play and what you drafted them for, just so they can survive. And then a year or two later, you wonder why that player hasn't met your expectations and hasn't grown into what you thought he was going to be, because you forced him into a situation where he had to change his habits, which changes his behaviors on the ice. So then what you have to do is reconstruct him again, change all his behaviors back to what he was, and hope that recovers. I just find it dangerous. Impatience is one of the worst things that NHL teams can do, and history has proven it. So keep your defensemen out of the NHL as long as possible. It's very rare for, look, the Schaefers of the world are they're the exception. They're the outlier. You can't look at them and think about any other defenseman doing what he did. It's an outlier. It's so rare. It's a moonshot. Forget about it. So even if he is the closest to being ready, I think he's still another year at least, if not 2, away from stepping into the NHL. I just think it's a dangerous proposition because history has proven it.
Shane, last year when I would be watching Jets draft pick Edison Engel highlights with Brantford, I couldn't help but notice this Caleb Malhotra. Every single time that there was a goal scored by Brantford, it seemed like he was on the ice for a goal. So he just is one of the, I just feel he's moved. There seems to be a lot of variability in terms of where he's seen to be going in the draft. From your perspective, what would teams get with?
Well, look, I think there's an opportunity for this player to play games in the NHL, but in all honesty, most of these prospects are a slow burn. So when in doubt, be patient with them. So I'll map this out for you after looking at the history of the drafts, particularly in the salary cap era. Top end of the draft, it's usually 2 years, sometimes 3 years from actually playing in the NHL. Bottom half of the draft, it's usually draft +4. Anything below that is draft +5. I mean, actually coming in, you'll get a cup of coffee here and there and then move up. But it's draft +5 to get yourself in the door and play with any level of consistency. So we're very much like baseball in that respect. We really are a slow burn. And that's where I think sometimes organizations can get themselves into trouble, or fan bases can get too ahead of themselves in terms of how quickly a player can come in, because they'll see one player do it or another player jump in. And it's an outlier. So 95% of the league is like, we're in these time frames. We can follow them almost to a clock of watching these players. So that's why I'm always pump the brakes, people. Yeah. Right? It's going to be okay. Let them develop at the rate they need to develop at, because the NHL is not a developmental league. at all. Even the American League, in many cases, that's a tough league. Like, you guys get to see Manitoba play.
Yep.
You know, I've had the Winnipeg Jets on my show for, the last since 2011. So whether it was, Chevy or Zinger or any of their staff or Jimmy Roy talk about that development cycle, and history proves that out. It's very, very slow. So they're very aware of that, and they're also pretty patient. They follow a similar model to what Detroit did way back in the days, try to overcook their players, because sometimes if you give them too much too soon, sometimes it's hard for those players to recover. And in many cases, depending on the player, they may have to alter their identity of what they were in college or what they were in Europe or what they were in the CHL to adapt to the NHL. So they may have been their top scorer, but you're not going to be on a first unit power play unit. You're not going to necessarily get first line or second line. So you may have to adapt your game to third line. And sometimes that takes some time as well. That may take an extra year or two in the American League to make that happen.
Shane, I wanted to circle back to a player that you mentioned earlier, Alexander Command. You've got ranked 10th overall, the Hockey Prospect Radio rankings, and you've got him ranked quite a bit higher. Again, I'm just comparing your rankings to the consolidated rankings on Elite Prospects, where he's ranked 25th overall. The only thing I know about him is that he's a center, he's Swedish, and he was really good at the U18s. And so what I wanted to ask you was, why are you maybe a little bit higher on him than others? It sounds like he is going to be a first-round pick, but it seems like you have him going, significantly higher, like I mentioned, than other scouts have him.
He's a bulldog. He really is. He's the type of player, if you mashed Sam Bennett with Mikhail Backlund from Calgary, if you mashed those two players together, that's Alexander Command. In conversations, we'll talk about his off ice first. He winds himself up before games in his head. I hate the opposition. They're the enemy. Anybody who has the puck, I'm coming after them. I'm going to take my pound of flesh. And it's that type of hyper-competitive Sam Bennett mentality that I really appreciate. On the ice, he's uber competitive. He is very good as an F1. His off-puck game is relentless. He plays with high pace. His details are very good off the puck, because the majority of your game is going to be 95% of your game is going to be off the puck. So he's the type of centerman that I think will be a second line center in the NHL. And how he's going to be able to make his team line mates better is because of his relentless puck pursuit, his B game. And Jason Bukla, who comes on my show all the time, he's also my boss at the Pro Hockey Group. We talk about B game all the time. And what are you doing off the puck? If your A game isn't working, what's your B game? So relentless puck pursuit, puck battles. He plays in the middle of the ice hard. He plays a hard game. He's going to take his pound of flesh from you. And how he makes his teammates better isn't necessarily through passing. His passing is good, but it's not elite. But he makes up for it in terms of his body position, getting the puck back, defenders having to divert to him because he's such a menace, and his attention to detail. So think about if you had Lowry's defensive abilities and with, a Sam Bennett's offense, right? Like, he's kind of in that. I think Alexander Command's going to wear a letter in the NHL. He's that type of leader. And if you get a chance to talk to Viggo Bork or Ivor Stenberg about him, he's the number one player they want to take with him on the ice. He's that type. Like, all his teammates love him. And he has that level of relentless work ethic. So for me, it's his hockey sense, relentless compete, skating ability in the middle of the ice. Those players are really hard to find. He's a playoff style player. And I always take lessons from what happens in the playoffs, what players and playing styles succeed, whether they're defensemen or forwards. And I take that. And then I look at the trade deadline, who's the most coveted players. Then I look at free agency, who are the coveted players and what are their attributes. And I apply those back to the draft and I weight that, which is why Alexander Command is so high. I mean this in the most complimentary way. I want as many bastards in my lineup as I possibly can. Guys that are just going to chew through cement walls for you. So if I can find guys with the mentality of an Adam Lowry, I'm going to go get him. And I'm going to pay for that earlier.
I'll be honest, Shane, you've sold me.
Yeah, he's my kind of player. Like those are the kind of guys that help you win in the playoffs. So, if you're in that range, and look, if Vigio Bork's there, I have him rate him higher. I would, like, if I'm in their situation, I have to take him. If I'm talking from my perspective.
Yeah.
But if Vigio is gone and they really are coveting a center, and maybe there's a defenseman left over that I think we're going to be okay at the decor. We really need a centerman. Then they're sitting there with like Lawrence and Command as real opportunities there. Because as I scale down my list, there really isn't another center that I think that is second line or better until there just isn't. So there's a really small number of centermen. So Malhotra, Bjork, Command, Lawrence are the only ones who I think are second line centermen or better in terms of the projection.
Yeah, Shane, it's funny because I was watching an interview and I don't remember if it was Stenberg or Bjork. I think it was Bjork. And they asked him who's the toughest player to play against. And he said, probably Command. And that was the guy. That's what they said. He said, he's absolutely a beast when you play again. And again, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert.
He's a honey badger.
Yeah.
He's a honey badger. Yeah. He's going to keep coming after you. Like he is. I wouldn't be shocked if the Florida Panthers took him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because they're at 9, behind Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't shock me if like Albert Smith-Say is sitting there and they're thinking about him, or if Command is there and they're thinking about him. Like that's a Florida Panthers type of player. Like that's just another guy that is going to take a pound of flesh from you from that standpoint. So eventually Barkov's going to have to retire, and they got Lundell there, but then, Bennett's eventually going to have to retire, but who replaces those guys? I wouldn't want to, like, that's a guy that I want on my team. I compare him, or I would give him this compliment. You want guys that, would you want to be in the foxhole with that guy? I'd want to be in the foxhole with Alexander Command.
I'd want to be in a foxhole with Dave Minuk.
There you go.
I appreciate that, Azzy. Shane, when we'll stick with the Swedish players, because that seems to be the Jets' bend these days when they make selections. Obviously, we saw with Alphonse Frey and Sasha Boumedienne, but Malte Gustafsson, that's a player I want to ask you about because he's a big 6'4" defenseman. What's kind of your assessment about him?
Well, I have him at 12th overall, and remember Matthias Oland, who played for Vancouver for the longest time, 6'4", 225-pound Viking. That's Malte Gustafsson.
Mm-hmm.
That's him in a nutshell. So, in the 900 AD, all of a sudden his boat comes up and a bunch of guys jump out with a horn and a battle axe. There's Malte Gustafsson. So I think he has enough offensive capability to give you 30 points a year.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also a guy who's going to be on your first unit PK, and he's going to match up defensively against a top line, and he'll be able to insulate a more offensive-minded defenseman. So you say it's Boumedienne, and you need somebody to allow him to skate and pass and be a little bit more of a rover. There's a guy who can insulate him and take care of him, but also take a pound of flesh. He's a hard out. So he's going to make forwards pay for him. And not very often do you see, every once in a while you see Swedes that are Vikings. It doesn't happen all the time. So, the Victor Hedmans and Gabriel Landeskog, there are the Swedes that are hard to play against. But in this draft, there seems to be 2, and it's Command and Gustafsson. So, I'm not sure if they would have Gustafsson that high at 8.
Mm-hmm.
However, maybe if there's a trade back and they want to get an extra first, that's a possibility. So it really depends on how their tier grouping works.
Right.
So my tier grouping, cuts off at 9, and then there's another tier that drops from like 10 down to 18. So, and then there's another tier, and I break mine down really specifically in terms of grading and where I think that player is going to play in their peak years of 23 to 31, 24 to 31. So I try to be as precise as I possibly can in those areas.
Shane, one last player we wanted to ask you about is Ryan Lynn. And you've got Ryan Lynn ranked 13th, and that's very consistent. I think the consolidated rankings have him 13th. And the reason why I bring that up is, and I think you would caution people that, to take the rankings with a grain of salt. Not to say that they're not going to be close to what's happening, but obviously your rankings, I'm sure, have changed multiple times in the last 3 or 4 months. But Ryan Lynn, I know, is a guy who's really impressed scouts at the U18s for Team Canada. And again, Ryan Lynn at 13th or 12th on your rankings. I think that's in the conversation for the Jets with the 8th overall pick. What stands out to you about Ryan Lynn?
Although he's not the biggest player in terms of height, he's 5'11". He'll probably play out at 185. So he's going to be an undersized defenseman, but hockey sense, mobility, and attention to detail off the puck. So he's the type of defenseman that when I look at offensive style defensemen, by Christmas, I'm ignoring their offensive output and I'm focusing solely on what they do off the puck. So you have to have a high level of attention of defensive habits when it comes to your gap control, your rush defense, your angles, your stick placement. He has to be able to break up as many plays as possible before the blue line or even the top of the circle, and then even by the face-off dot. That's where he's going to have to be at his best. So when I'm judging smaller defensemen, I'm like, can you defend similar to Jared Spurgeon? Jared Spurgeon is really my ideal as a smaller defenseman who can defend. And I'm looking for habits that are similar to that. And I think he's going to be capable to be a second pairing defenseman, but an offensive guy that can transport the puck, that can move the puck really quickly and be dangerous in transition and be able to quarterback a power play. There's a difference between defensemen who are on the power play and quarterback, because quarterback means the play is going through you and filtering through you. I think he's capable of that. One of the other reasons why I moved him up. Now, how I built my system for my draft list, I have an automated system. So all the data comes in and then it automates a list for me. But what it does is it puts it into these tier groups. And I put in bumpers and safeguards for myself to protect myself from myself, because I'm my biggest problem, right? You have your own. So I have to protect my own biases from me. And I have these conversations with myself in my head. All right, we have to protect you from you. And so in these tiering groups, I can't move the player above or below. So, at one point, in my discussions with myself is I could have had Lynn as low as 18 or as high as 10, but that's only where I can have him. One of the reasons why I moved him up is he's going to the University of Denver, and where players go in their development cycle really matter. Environment matters in your development.
I heard, by the way, that Shane, that University of Denver's a pretty decent team.
Yeah, they're okay. Yeah, they win a little bit, right? They win a little bit. And they're very, very astute at developing defensemen. So he's going to go into an environment for the next 2 years that's going to help him evolve in terms of the type of defenseman that he has to be off the puck to succeed at the NHL. Not worried about his hockey sense, not worried about his skating ability and his four-way mobility, not worried about his shot and his passing. Everything is going to be predicated on what he does off the puck. And the better he is at that and playing against young men, so he's in a really tough conference. On average, they're about 22 years of age. So he's going to be playing against young men, not boys. So that's going to be a great learning curve for him. So if he had gone to a different program or had stayed in the dub, I would have had him lower in this tier. I would have dropped him. Mm-hmm. He would have been farther down. But because he went to Denver, that satisfies me in understanding how well he's going to be developed, and it increases his probability to play not only on a second pair, but to play above 200 games in the NHL.
And Denver's also got Dax and Rudolph next year. So
yeah,
I wouldn't want to go up against those guys next year.
Yeah, they're going to be fighting for another national championship again. And I think it's a great opportunity for CHL players to go play college hockey. Because I think what we didn't have in hockey for the longest time was a developmental path similar to baseball. So we didn't have single A, double A, triple A. So now you can, like the CHL and the USHL and junior leagues in Europe are like our single A. And then college hockey is our double A. And then the American League is our triple A. So that you have a longer development pathway and a longer runway for these players. So they don't I don't like necessarily seeing 20-year-olds come into the American Hockey League, or even 19-year-olds for that matter. I like for them to be a little bit longer in the tooth before they make it there, because the American League's a meat grinder. It's a brutally tough league to play in, and it's actually sometimes easier for these players to play in the NHL, particularly with the puck. So I like to keep them out of the American League as long as possible and let them physically, mentally, and emotionally develop. It's not necessarily always about the physical side, but it's the mental, emotional development that is required to be able to build the habits so that when you come into the NHL, you're prepared off the ice. Even much more important than on the ice is your off-ice habits to help you be prepared and be a professional.
Well, Shane, this has prepared our audience because one of our chatters said this interview has been incredibly informing. Best prospect breakdown I've seen this year. Amazing guest. So we thank you for bringing your time and your insight to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I
appreciate it. It's only because I've been mentored by great scouts. So this is my 27th draft I've covered, and I go sit with the scouts. So that's how I learned how to scout, and I've been very fortunate in that respect. So if it wasn't for the scouting community, particularly in Western Canada, I wouldn't have a job in this community because there's no manual and there's no school for scouts. So if they don't mentor you, you don't know what you're doing. So anytime I go to a game, you'll never see me in the press box unless it's an NHL game. I'm always in the corner with the scouts trying to learn. And same with the player development guys. They've been great to me too. So I've been fortunate. The Winnipeg Jets guys have been fantastic to me. So I've been very, very lucky. But I'm always fair and I'm always hard. So if they screw up, I will put their feet to the fire, and they know it, and they just have a chuckle about it. But they know I'm in the rink, so they don't give me too much grief.
Well, we appreciate it. We look forward to hearing from you again on our show, and we appreciate you bringing your time and your insight onto the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Take care, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, Shane.
Thanks, Shane. You too.
There you go, Shane Malloy. Well, that was a great guest, Ezzy, and it's been a great 2 hours of Illegal Curve Hockey. What a way to end the show. Nothing really, anything else? You have any final thoughts, any final things you'd like to share with the chat before we join them for next week on the next Saturday, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show?
No, great show, Dave. Yeah, Shane Malloy was great. Christian Aumell of CJOB was also great in the first hour, and just looking forward to tomorrow's Game 6. Hopefully Carolina is going to wrap it up, and I'm going to have my first correct Stanley Cup prediction in 11 years. But no, looking forward to the draft coming up in 13 days.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot of fun. Congratulations, by the way, quickly. Kelly Moore and Russ Hobson, Manitoba Media Honor Roll. That's nice for them. There are others as well, but those are the two that we're very familiar with here on this show. And of course, former Moose head coach and Jets assistant coach Pascal Vincent back in the NHL. He joins the Seattle Kraken as an assistant coach. So congrats to those fellows.
Pascal, great guy.
Yeah, a big thanks to Ezzy for joining me for this morning. Big thanks to everybody in the chat, and a big thanks to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the post-game show, the Saturday show, and the website illegalcurve.com. Possibility they are in no particular order: Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Play Now, Holt Dental, City Place, Wheatland Hockey, Boston Pizza. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. All right, Ezra, that is it for us. We are going to get our weekend started. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hopefully it warms up here in Winnipeg or in Manitoba or wherever you are. But thanks for joining us this morning. Smash that like button, folks, before you head out, as Only in the Peg is instructing the chat. And we will be with you next Saturday, 9 o'clock in the morning, to discuss anything that's happened with the Winnipeg Jets during the week, and of course get you set for the draft 1 week's time next week. And of course, stay tuned to illegalcurve.com for all the latest Jets and Moose and Manitoba hockey news. That's it for us. Thanks for everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend.